Okay, this is the next video tutorial. This is part 2 of the video tutorial for editing your multi-camera interviews. And what this tutorial has to do with is how to actually trim the interview itself to make this a more concise, a more focused video. Because here's the thing, this interview that we're using as our example here was a 20-minute long interview. You can see that here when I move my playhead here. It's a 20-minute long interview. I don't want you to turn in a 20-minute long video. I don't want you to turn in a video that is the full length of your conversation. Now, I don't have a length requirement for this video. I haven't told you it needs to be a certain length, like a certain, between a certain number of minutes or something like that. But instead, I'm giving you some different instructions here. What I've done is I've taken this 20-minute conversation and I was able to trim it down to about 3 minutes, which is what you can see right here. Basically kind of choosing what I want to focus on and also prioritizing the most important, most impactful lines in this interview. And I want you to do something similar. You should definitely be trimming your interview by at least 50%, probably more like 25%, or more like 75%, making it about a quarter as long as it was originally. Because the thing is that as great as this interview was and as wonderful as she was to talk to, probably not people are going to watch this 20-minute long interview unless I'm interviewing like the president or something like that. This 3-minute interview is probably about right for what we need. So I'm going to show you how to do this process. When you turn in your footage, I'm going to do something with your footage. I'm going to upload an audio transcript of your interview to our Blackboard page. Let me show you that. So in our Blackboard page in week 9, or maybe in another week, I'll tell you if it's a different semester, there will be an item here called interview transcripts. It'll be above these tutorials, your editing tutorials here. When you click on this link, this one just says example, but there will be one for each group. When you click on this link, it's going to bring up an audio transcript, a transcript of your discussion, your conversation that you had. It's just an audio file, and you could, if you wanted to, listen to the entire conversation. However, you probably don't want to do that, but if you click here where it says captions on the top left, you can actually see text. You can see captions of this entire conversation. Now, they're not perfect because this is AI generated, so it's just a computer, but it's pretty good, and you can actually read through your entire conversation. This is really critical because we're going to use this to choose the most important quotes from this interview. What I want you to choose is the quotes that give you the most impact, the quotes that have emotional impact, the quotes that are interesting, engaging, that will hold viewers' attention. Because here's the thing, someone is not going to go onto YouTube or whatever to watch a video and then watch it and realize, oh, this is just information. I could have just read this in a story. If all they're doing is telling you information like statistics or something like that, that's not necessarily what needs to be included in a video. For a video, we want impact over information. That's what we're looking for. So next thing you're going to do is you're going to use a very important video editing tool. Perhaps you've used it before. The name of this video editing tool you're going to use for this next part is called Microsoft Word. To find that program, go up to the spotlight, find Word or Microsoft Word, and you're going to make a Word document. You're going to make a Word document where you're going to copy the important lines from this transcript and paste them in a Word document to sort of arrange which quotes you think are the most important. So I can just show you that process. I've actually done this already, and I'll go ahead and show you the file that I made. Oh, whoops. So let me actually show you the file that I made for this. I've got my transcript open here. So I've already, so you can open up Microsoft Word on your computer. I've actually already got the transcript here, and I'll go ahead and open it up. I've already made a transcript here. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and open up a transcript that I've already made. So what I did was I just looked through this interview, and because I was in the room, I sort of remember what she said, and I just looked for the lines that seemed like they had the most impact, they seemed the most interesting, and then I just simply kind of highlighted them, copied them, and then pasted them into a Word document. And I also included the time where those showed up there, along with each quote. And I just chose quotes that I thought might be kind of interesting. Now, I split this into two areas. I made impact quotes, quotes that were emotionally impactful. And then on the second page, I have information quotes, quotes that I think give some important information. So this video that you're going to create, it has to have some information. It has to have some information so that the people watching the video know what it's about and kind of have some background. And that's probably going to come more toward the beginning of the video. And then most of the rest of it will be this impact. She said a lot of things in this interview. She talked about all kinds of things. I didn't choose everything that she said to copy into this. I just chose the things that were most interesting to me, and then went through this too. But I'm not even going to use all of these quotes, because after I pasted these quotes into my document and I looked through them, I thought, is there like a cohesive narrative that I can build together through this interview? By the way, this interview is with a theater student at Grandview, and the question that she was asked is, how is 2021 different from 2020 regarding the pandemic or whatever else? And she talked about the ways that she's seen that as a theater student. But she talked about a lot of other things too. As you can see from this transcript, she talked about all kinds of things. What I decided to do was to really focus on where she talked about theater and the impact that theater has had on her life, and the ways that theater has been affected by the pandemic and how it's different from 2020 to 2021. So I really just kind of focused on the theater stuff to help me narrow this down. And I didn't choose every quote from this. I just chose like the selected ones. So the first one I selected, I selected quotes like this one at 1948. This is right toward the end of the interview. She said, "What I found is a sort of religion in theater." It's such a good quote. It's such a good, impactful quote. What I did is I highlighted it, and I used this little highlighter tool at the top left to highlight that bit of text to say, that's a really important clip for me. Now, she said another really impactful thing here at 1831 about leaving the church and some history with her father. But the thing was, is as much as I like this line, I couldn't find a way to fit it in with the overall story. She didn't say much about theater in this line, so I thought maybe this doesn't quite work, and that's okay. So I didn't highlight this one. I did highlight this one because, again, she talked about theater. I didn't talk about this one because it didn't quite fit what we're talking about here. This one seemed good. It's about theater and activism. I also highlighted this one, and I think I left these two out as well. As good as they were, I didn't highlight these ones. So out of all of these lines, these 10 or so lines, I only highlighted about 5 of them, I think. The next in information, the first question she answers is, what's the difference between 2020 and 2021? I've got to answer that question. I have to have that information, so I highlighted this one. And I highlighted this one too. She said she's a woman playwright. And I went ahead and highlighted this one. She's talking about what changes she'd like to see in the theater industry after 2021, so I highlighted that as well. Now, after I had finished highlighting these, I have to figure out what order I want these quotes to appear in. Because the thing is that just because she said something at the very end of the interview doesn't mean it has to come at the end of my edit of the interview. And so on the third page, I just went down to a third page and I made something called an edited transcript. All I did for this was I copied and pasted the lines that I liked in the order that I want to show them. Actually, this line that she says here at 1948, what I found is a sort of religion in theater, I thought that was a great opener. And so in my edited transcript, I actually put that at the very beginning. This will be the first line that shows up in the video, even though it's one of the last things that she said. Then after this high impact line, I put an information line here. And that's how I want you to arrange this too. Whatever is the most impactful thing that the person says, whatever is the most high impact line from the interview, make that the first thing that we see in the video. Whether they said it at the beginning or end of the interview, make it happen at the beginning of your edit. Then whatever they said in the interview that was the most informational, the most helpful, that gave the most background information for what this video is about, make that number 2 in your edited transcript. Make that the second thing that your audience hears. From there, I just chose other high impact lines and tried to arrange them in a way that made some sense, made narrative sense. She talks about being a woman playwright and then talks about activism in theater. She talked a lot about women being in the front, that sort of thing. And then I chose a line here that I thought was a good closer. I think it's important to let anyone know they're in a safe space with me. That seemed like a decent closer, and I made that the end. A little bit lesser impact, but still important line here. So these are all the lines that are going to be in my final video. Just all of these quotes that happen in these different places. Once you've done this, you have edited. I know maybe it doesn't feel like you're editing because you're in Word, but you are video editing when you're doing this process. And it's a lot easier to do it this way than it is to try to do it in Premiere. And you also don't have to listen to as much audio and get tired ears and get a headache and all of that through this process. So do this video editing process on Word and make sure to save this document. I think I just saved it in my projects folder, in my 5-folder setup, just to have a place for it. Okay, now you can open up your Premiere project. Once you've got your edited transcript here, you can go into your Premiere project. And this is my edited transcript. This is after I've made my edits. But let me show you the before. So again, I've got my 20-minute long interview here, all of my everything, nothing's been cut or anything like that. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to find those quotes that are in my edited transcript, the ones that I wanted to include, and I'm going to isolate them. I'm just going to kind of cut them out from the rest of everything else using my cut tool. So the first line in my edited transcript is this one at 1948. So I'm going to move my playhead over to around there, hit play, and see if I can find where she says what I found is a sort of religion in theater. And I'm also going to zoom in here. I'm going to use my tool here to zoom in so I can get really close to that. And let's take a look. Let's take a listen here.
Oh, that's kind of sad, I guess. But what I have found is a sort of religion in theater.
There is where she says it. I've sort of found a religion in theater.
But what I have found...
Now, the interesting thing here that I want to think about is at the beginning of her quote, she says, but what I have found is a sort of religion in theater. That might not make a lot of sense because it's happening at the very beginning of the interview. When she says, but, that means something happened before that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to listen really carefully, and I'm just going to cut to where she says, what I have found. I'm going to cut out that but.
But what I...
And I'm going to use my arrow keys here to find right where she says, what I have found.
What I have...
There we go. Right there. Then I'm going to use my cut tool. Cut is one of these tools here. It's this one that looks like a razor. Use my cut tool and cut right there on my playhead. And then I can play here and see what it sounds like.
What I have found is a sort of religion in theater. When I walk into a theater, it's a peaceful feeling that comes over me. When I read script, it's peace. When I work with a fellow actor, it's like my soul is alive and speaking and sparking. So I guess that's my religion, probably.
Okay, that's the end of the quote. She says, so I guess that's my religion probably, right? That's the end of the quote that I had here. I'm going to find the end of that and make sure I'm right at the end of that. Give a little space here. I'm zooming way in here. Find the end of that quote. I don't want to go any further than this because this is where she starts saying something else. Use my razor tool to cut that part out. Now, if I zoom out, I can see this whole section right here that I just cut. Next thing I'm going to do to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to use my selection tool up here, and then I'm going to click on my little clip here. You can see how it's kind of isolated from the rest. And I'm going to right-click and find this option here, Label. And right now it's colored forest. It's a green colored clip. I'm going to label this one violet just so it's a different color than the other ones here. So I know that it's a different color. I'm going to do that with the rest of them. I'll isolate one more in this video so you can see. So next I want to find this line at 109 where she says, so I think the biggest contrast. I'm going to move my playhead over to about that point here, start zooming in where she starts answering this question.
Okay. So I think the biggest contrast.
Right around there. I'll use my cut tool to find the beginning of that line. I'll move my playhead over until she's done saying whatever she's saying. Bored of the pandemic are the last words I'm looking for.
What we do, we gather. Pandemic.
That's, I think, where she says she's bored of the pandemic. Cut that line out. and then use my selection tool and then label this violet. And I'm just kind of, selecting the clips that I want to use. Selecting everything in violet, that's a clip that I want to use. Once I've actually selected everything, once I've actually found all the lines that I want to use, I can go ahead and delete the other stuff. So anything that's green, anything that I haven't labeled, anything that I didn't actually highlight out, I can actually just start deleting it. So I can click on it to highlight this section here and delete it. So wait to do this until you've actually labeled everything that you want to use, and then you can start arranging things around.